The vast ships of the Zephyrian Empire hung in the darkness between stars like sleeping giants. For 3,000 years, they had brought order to chaos across 12 star systems. The Empire did not conquer through violence. They conquered through logic, superior technology, and the simple truth that resistance was pointless. Ambassador Kethvar stood before the great viewing screen in his chambers, watching the stars drift past. His pale blue skin had the smooth texture of polished stone, and his large black eyes reflected no emotion. Emotion was inefficient. The Zephyrian people had learned this lesson long ago, when they chose the path of pure reason. A soft chime announced a visitor. "Enter," Kethvar said without turning. High Commander Thexnal glided into the room. Her silver robes marked her rank in the Imperial Council. "Ambassador, we have received new intelligence about the target system." "Sol 3, Kethvar replied, using the official designation. "What have the observation probes discovered?" Thexnal activated a holographic display. Images of Earth filled the air between them. Cities burned in some pictures. Armies marched in others. The planet's surface showed scars of mining, pollution, and deforestation. "As expected," she continued, "the inhabitants are primitive and self-destructive. They wage constant war against their own species. They poison their own environment. Their technology is barely sufficient for basic space travel." Kethvar studied the images with his analytical mind. The humans appeared to be bipedal mammals, similar to many species the Empire had encountered. Their cities showed some organization, but also clear signs of inequality and waste. "What is their population?" he asked. 8 billion individuals, concentrated on the single inhabited world. No significant colonies on other planets in their system. Their weapons are crude, but numerous. Thexnal paused. "They call themselves humans." "Humans." Kethvar tested the word. It felt strange on his tongue. "Have they detected our observation probes?" "No. Their sensor technology is centuries behind ours. We could maintain surveillance indefinitely, without discovery." This was good news. The Empire preferred to study potential subjects before making contact. Understanding a species made integration smoother. Kethvar had overseen 17 such missions. The pattern was always the same. Initial shock at meeting a superior civilization, followed by negotiations, and finally peaceful submission to imperial rule. "The Council has reviewed the data," Thexnal continued. "They believe this species will provide useful manual labor and basic manufacturing capability. Their world contains resources we need for expansion into the next galactic sector." Kethvar nodded. "Standard integration protocol. Then, establish contact, demonstrate technological superiority, offer protection in exchange for cooperation." "Precisely. However, there is one unusual aspect to this mission." The commander's expression became more serious. "The humans broadcast constantly. Their communication signals fill space around their planet. They seem to share information freely, even sensitive information." This was indeed unusual. Most species guarded their communications carefully. "What kind of information?" "Entertainment, news, personal messages. They appear to document their own failures openly. Wars, crimes, disasters. They broadcast everything." Thexnal shook her head slightly. "It shows remarkable lack of strategic thinking." Kethvar filed this information away. Every species had quirks. Understanding these quirks made his job easier. "When does the Council want me to make contact?" "One haven't signed. Any to tell." Kethvar, "Within the next solar cycle, your ship is already prepared for departure. The usual diplomatic protocols apply." "I understand." Kethvar had made first contact so many times that he could perform the ritual in his sleep. Arrive undetected. Study the species for several local time periods. Choose the optimal moment for revelation. Demonstrate power without causing panic. Negotiate terms of integration. There is one more thing, Thexnall added. The humans have a strange custom. They form emotional attachments to other individuals, even those outside their immediate family groups. Some of their broadcasts show them helping strangers with no expectation of return benefit. Kethvar found this puzzling. Perhaps a primitive form of social cooperation? Many species develop basic altruism before achieving true logical society. Possibly. The analysts suggest it might make them easier to manipulate. They may value the welfare of others more than their own strategic advantage. This was excellent news. Species that prioritized emotion over logic were always easier to govern. They made decisions based on feelings, rather than careful calculation. The Empire could protect them from their own poor choices. 3 hours later, Kethvar's personal ship departed for the Sol system. The vessel was small by Imperial standards, only 500 meters long, but it contained technology that would seem like magic to the humans. Faster than light travel, energy shields, matter conversion systems, artificial intelligence networks, tools that the Empire had perfected over millennia. As his ship jumped through hyperspace, Kethvar reviewed his mission files. The humans had emerged from their primitive state only recently, in galactic terms. A few thousand years ago, they were still using stone tools. Now they had basic computers and chemical rockets. Their development had been remarkably rapid, but also chaotic and unguided. Their planet showed the results of this uncontrolled growth. The climate was becoming unstable. Species were dying at an accelerated rate. The humans seemed incapable of managing their own success. They needed guidance from a wiser, more experienced civilization. Kethvar felt the familiar satisfaction that came with helping a younger species find their proper place in the galactic order. The Empire brought peace, stability, and purpose to chaotic worlds. The humans would learn to appreciate these gifts, just as others had. The journey to Earth took 7 standard days. During this time, Kethvar continued studying human communications. Their entertainment showed constant themes of conflict, but also something the analysts had not mentioned, themes of sacrifice and redemption. Humans in their stories often gave up personal advantage to help others. This confirmed that they were driven by emotion rather than logic. When his ship finally entered the Sol system, Kethvar positioned it behind Earth's moon for initial observation. The planet below showed the same patterns of chaos and waste that the probes had documented. Cities blazed with artificial light even on the night side, wasting enormous amounts of energy. Orbital space was cluttered with primitive satellites and debris. Yet something about the planet seemed different from the sterile images in his files. Perhaps it was the swirling white clouds, or the deep blue oceans, or the patches of green that covered much of the land surface. Despite the humans' destructive tendencies, their world still maintained a wild beauty that reminded Kethvar of something he could not quite identify. Tomorrow, he would make first contact with the human leadership. Tonight, he would rest and prepare for another successful integration mission. The Great Assembly Hall of the United Nations had never been so quiet. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat in stunned silence, as the figure before them defied everything they thought they knew about the universe. Kethvar stood on the speaking platform, his pale blue skin almost glowing under the harsh lights. He had materialized there without warning, his ship's teleportation technology bypassing every security system on Earth. Similar appearances had occurred simultaneously at government buildings in every major capital. The message was clear. Nowhere was beyond his reach. People of Earth, he began, his voice carrying easily through the hall without any visible amplification device. I am Ambassador Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire. We have been observing your world for some time. Secretary General Chen Martinez was the first to recover his composure. Who? I am what you would call an extraterrestrial being. My people have traveled between the stars for longer than your civilization has existed. Kethvar gestured, and holographic displays filled the air above the assembly. Images of vast star systems, impossible cities, and fleets of ships that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. The representatives stared at the displays with a mixture of wonder and growing fear. Kethvar had seen this reaction countless times. First shock, then the slow realization of how small and powerless they were in comparison. "Why are you here?" asked Dr. Sarah Kim, a linguistic expert who had been hastily called in as a cultural advisor. She was a small woman with dark hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to study Kethvar with scientific curiosity rather than fear. "The Zephyrian Empire brings order to chaotic systems. Your species has demonstrated remarkable potential, but also remarkable capacity for self-destruction. We offer protection, guidance, and membership in a galactic community that spans 12 star systems." President Reynolds leaned forward in her seat. Kethvar had prepared for this question. Refusal would be unfortunate. Your world is strategically important for expansion into this galactic sector. Your people possess skills that would benefit the Empire. It would be far better for all involved if this transition occurred peacefully. The threat was polite but unmistakable. Around the assembly hall, military leaders whispered urgently into communication devices. Kethvar allowed them their preparations. Human weapons would be as effective against his ship as throwing rocks at a mountain. "What would this membership involve?" Dr. Kim asked. Her voice remained steady. Professional. Kethvar found himself appreciating her composure. "Your people would be relocated to worlds better suited to your needs. Earth's resources would be developed efficiently under imperial supervision. Humans would receive education in proper social organization and useful trades." Relocated? The word sparked immediate protest from several representatives. "You're talking about enslaving our entire species." Kethvar felt a flicker of annoyance at their emotional response. "Not enslavement. Integration. Every species benefits when they join the Empire. You would be fed, housed, given meaningful work. War would end. Poverty would end. Disease would end. Is this not preferable to your current chaos?" The protests continued, but Dr. Kim raised her hand for silence. "Ambassador Kethvar, may I ask about your people? Do you have families? Children?" The question surprised him. It seemed irrelevant to the negotiations. The Zephyrian reproductive process is managed by the state for optimal genetic outcomes. Offspring are raised in educational facilities designed for maximum efficiency. But do you have personal relationships? Friends? People you care about? Kethvar found the question difficult to answer. Care about was not a concept that translated well into Zephyrian thinking. "We have associates, colleagues. The Empire provides all necessary social interaction." Dr. Kim nodded thoughtfully. "Would you join us for a meal?" This was unexpected. Kethvar's briefings had not prepared him for social invitations, but understanding human customs would make the integration process smoother. "I accept your invitation." R. 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 The cafeteria in the UN building was a simple place, filled with tables and chairs where staff normally ate their midday meal. Dr. Kim had arranged for a variety of foods to be brought in. She served herself from the selection and invited Kethvar to do the same. "I'm not certain our foods would be compatible with your biology," she said, "but perhaps you could try small amounts?" Kethvar used his ship's medical scanner to analyze the offerings. Most were safe for consumption. He selected several items and sat across from Dr. Kim at a small table. Other humans had gathered around nearby tables, but they maintained a respectful distance. "This is called soup, Doctor," Kim explained, indicating a bowl of liquid with vegetables and meat. "My grandmother taught me to make it. She said that sharing food was the first step to understanding someone." "Your grandmother was involved in your education? That seems inefficient. Why not leave training to specialists?" Dr. Kim smiled, an expression that showed her teeth. Kethvar's files indicated this was a sign of friendliness among humans. She taught me things that specialists couldn't. Stories about our family, wisdom about how to treat people. The importance of kindness. Kindness? Kethvar tasted the soup. It was flavorful, more complex than the nutrition cubes his people consumed. Define this concept. Treating others well even when you gain nothing from it, helping when you don't have to, caring about the welfare of others. As they ate, other humans approached their table. A security guard asked if Kethvar needed anything for his comfort. A janitor apologized for disturbing them while cleaning nearby tables. A young translator offered to help if there were communication difficulties. Each interaction puzzled Kethvar more. These humans had no authority over him. They gained nothing from their offers of assistance. Yet they seemed genuinely concerned for his welfare. "Why do they do this?" he asked Dr. Kim after the janitor had left. "Do what?" "Offer help without being asked. Express concern for my comfort." Dr. Kim set down her spoon and looked at him directly. "Because you're a guest in our building. Because you're far from home and probably feeling uncertain. Because it's the right thing to do." Later that evening, as Kethvar returned to his ship, he found a small package waiting by the teleportation coordinates. Inside was a drawing made by crayons on paper. It showed two stick figures, one blue, one brown, standing together under a yellow sun. At the bottom, someone had written in large, careful letters, "Welcome to Earth, friend." Kethvar studied the drawing for a long time. No one had ever called him friend before. In Zephyrian society, the word did not exist. They had colleagues, subordinates, and superiors. But friends? He carefully placed the drawing in his personal quarters and began composing his preliminary report to the Imperial Council. But for the first time in his career, he found himself struggling to find the right words to describe what he had observed. The emergency sirens wailed across the coastal city as Typhoon Elena roared toward shore. Kethvar watched from his cloaked ship as wind and rain lashed the buildings below. Weather monitoring systems had predicted the storm's path days in advance, yet thousands of humans remained in the danger zone. "Illogical," he muttered, making notes for his report. "They have adequate warning and the technology to evacuate, yet they choose to remain in harm's way." Dr. Kim's voice crackled through the communication device she had given him. "Ambassador, are you monitoring the storm? You should see what's happening at the emergency shelters." Kethvar had been observing human society for 3 weeks now. Dr. Kim had become his unofficial guide to human culture, though he still did not understand why she devoted so much time to his education when she received no obvious benefit from it. He activated his ship's enhanced sensors and focused on the emergency shelters. What he saw defied logical explanation. Hundreds of humans were working in the torrential rain, loading vehicles with supplies. But these were not government workers or military personnel. According to his scans, they were ordinary citizens, shopkeepers, teachers, office workers, retirees. They had driven through dangerous conditions to reach the emergency centers, bringing food, blankets, and medical supplies from their own homes. "Dr. Kim," he said into the communicator, "I am observing volunteers at the emergency shelters. This behavior does not match my data on human psychology." "What do you mean?" "They gain no compensation for this work. Many have traveled significant distances through hazardous conditions. The logical choice would be to secure their own safety and resources." Her response was interrupted by static as the storm intensified. When the signal cleared, he heard her voice again. "Ambassador, I'm at Mercy General Hospital. The emergency room is receiving casualties from the storm. Would you like to observe our medical response procedures?" Kethvar transported himself to the hospital, materializing in a corner of the busy emergency room. His cloaking field rendered him invisible to the humans rushing back and forth. What he saw challenged everything he understood about efficient resource allocation. Dr. Martinez, the chief emergency physician, had been working for 18 straight hours. His clothes were stained with blood and sweat, his hands shook with exhaustion, yet he continued moving from patient to patient. A young nurse, named Jenny, had stayed past her scheduled shift to care for storm victims. An elderly volunteer named Mrs. Patterson was comforting frightened children whose parents were being treated for injuries. But the most puzzling case was in bed 17. An unconscious man had been brought in with severe injuries from flying debris. He carried no identification, no insurance information, no means of payment. According to Kethvar's understanding of human economics, the hospital should refuse treatment or provide only minimal care. Instead, Dr. Martinez spent 2 hours in surgery saving the man's life. Specialized equipment worth more than most humans earned in a year was used without hesitation. The entire medical team worked as hard for this unknown indigent as they would for a wealthy patient. "Dr. Kim," Kethvar said quietly into his communicator, "explain the economic logic of treating patients who cannot pay. It's not about economics, Ambassador. It's about doing what's right. That man is someone's father, someone's son. His life has value regardless of his bank account. Value determined by whom? What authority assigns worth to individuals who contribute nothing to society?" There was a long pause before Dr. Kim answered. "We don't need an authority to tell us that every human life matters. We just know it." After the storm passed, Kethvar observed the recovery efforts. Again, the behavior patterns made no logical sense. Neighbors helped neighbors repair damaged homes, even when they barely knew each other. Businesses donated supplies to strangers. People with intact houses offered shelter to displaced families. Most remarkably, he witnessed a group of teenagers spending their weekend cleaning debris from an elderly woman's yard. When he scanned them, he discovered they had never met her before the storm. They simply saw someone who needed help and provided it. "This is unprecedented," he told Dr. Kim during one of their regular meetings. "In every other society the Empire has encountered, individuals prioritize their own welfare and that of their immediate genetic relatives. These humans regularly sacrifice personal resources for complete strangers." They were sitting in a small coffee shop near the United Nations building. Dr. Kim had explained that humans often conducted informal business in such establishments. Kethvar found the custom strange but not unpleasant. "Tell me about your people," Dr. Kim said, stirring something called sugar into her coffee. "Do the Zephyrians help each other during emergencies?" "The Empire provides all necessary services through official channels. Individual assistance would create inefficiencies and potential conflicts over resource allocation." "But what about friendships? Personal bonds between individuals?" Kethvar struggled to explain. "The Empire discourages unnecessary personal attachments. They create emotional instability and impair rational decision-making. Doesn't that get lonely?" "Lonely?" The word was not in his active vocabulary. "Define this concept." Dr. Kim set down her cup and looked at him with an expression he was beginning to recognize. The same look humans gave to injured animals or frightened children. Lonely means feeling isolated, disconnected from others. It means wanting someone to care about you just because you exist, not because of what you can do for them. Such desires would be considered psychological dysfunction among my people. "Maybe," she said softly. "But I think that psychological dysfunction might be what makes us human." That evening, Kethvar attended a community meeting about storm recovery. He expected to observe practical discussions about repair schedules and resource distribution. Instead, he found something else entirely. The meeting began with a moment of silence for storm victims who had died. People who had never met these victims stood quietly, heads bowed, showing respect for the dead simply because they were fellow humans. Then came testimonials. Person after person stood to thank neighbors, strangers, and volunteers who had helped them. An old man wept openly as he described teenagers who had chopped fallen trees from his driveway. A young mother praised the nurse who had stayed with her injured son throughout the night. But what affected Kethvar most was the end of the meeting. The community announced plans for a memorial garden to honor storm victims. They would spend their own money and time to create something beautiful for people who would never benefit from it. As Kethvar returned to his ship that night, he found another drawing waiting for him. This one showed stick figures helping each other rebuild houses after a storm. At the bottom, a child had written, "Thank you for watching over us, Mr. Space Friend." For the first time in his 3-century lifespan, Kethvar felt something he could not identify or categorize. It was warm and uncomfortable, and somehow precious, all at once. He sat in his quarters for hours, staring at the drawing and trying to compose his weekly report to the Imperial Council. How could he explain a species that chose compassion over logic? How could he describe people who sacrificed for strangers and found joy in giving rather than receiving? More disturbing still, how could he recommend the destruction of something so beautiful? The secure communication chamber aboard Kethvar's ship hummed to life as the quantum entanglement link connected across thousands of light-years. High Commander Thexnal's holographic image materialized, her silver robes and emotionless expression exactly as he remembered. "Ambassador," she began without preamble, "the Council has reviewed your preliminary reports. Your observations of human society are unusual. Please clarify your assessment of their military capabilities." Kethvar had been dreading this conversation for days. "Their weapons are primitive by our standards, Commander. Chemical explosives, kinetic projectiles, basic nuclear devices. They pose no threat to Imperial forces." "Excellent. And their industrial capacity?" "Sufficient for basic manufacturing under Imperial supervision. Their population is large and could provide adequate labor resources." The words felt like ash in his mouth. "Then we can proceed with standard integration protocol. The Council expects your final report within one local time period, followed by immediate implementation of occupation procedures." Kethvar hesitated. In his centuries of service, he had never questioned an Imperial decision. But now, faced with the reality of what integration meant for humanity, he found himself struggling to respond. "Commander, I have observed some unique characteristics of human society that may complicate standard procedures." Thexnal's expression sharpened. "Humans appear to form emotional attachments that extend beyond genetic relationships. They regularly sacrifice personal resources for the welfare of strangers. They demonstrate what they call compassion, a behavior pattern that prioritizes others' welfare over logical self-interest. Emotional dysfunction is common among primitive species. It will be corrected through proper education and psychological conditioning." The casual dismissal of humanity's greatest strength sent a chill through Kethvar's body. "Commander, with respect, I do not believe this is dysfunction. I have observed humans accomplish remarkable things through these emotional bonds. They coordinate complex emergency responses through volunteer networks. They care for sick and injured individuals with no expectation of benefit. They create art, music, and literature that serves no practical purpose, yet brings them great satisfaction." 2-4 Prost. "Ambassador, your reports suggest you may have been contaminated by prolonged exposure to human irrationality. This is not uncommon in field agents. Upon your return, you will undergo standard psychological cleansing." Kethvar felt something cold grip his chest. Psychological cleansing would erase not just his memories of Earth, but the strange new emotions he had been experiencing. The warmth he felt when humans smiled at him. The satisfaction of watching them help each other. The peculiar sensation he got when looking at children's drawings. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "the Council should review additional data before making final decisions. I could extend my mission to gather more comprehensive intelligence." Unnecessary. The Empire's expansion schedule requires immediate action. Prepare your final recommendations for human resource allocation. The fleet will arrive within 10 standard days to begin operations. The communication ended, leaving Kethvar alone with the weight of what he had just learned. 10 days. In 10 days, Imperial ships would arrive, and humanity's brief moment of freedom would end. Forever. He found Dr. Kim waiting for him at their usual meeting place. A small park near the United Nations building, where children played while their parents watched. It had become their routine to meet here each morning. Though Kethvar still could not explain why he looked forward to these encounters. "You look troubled," Dr. Kim observed as he sat beside her on the wooden bench. Kethvar watched a group of children playing a game that involved running and laughing. Their joy seemed to radiate outward, affecting even the adults who observed them. "Dr. Kim, may I ask you a hypothetical question?" "Of course. If you knew that something terrible was going to happen to someone you cared about, but preventing it would require you to betray everything you had been taught was right, what would you do?" Dr. Kim was quiet for a long moment, watching the children play. "I think," she said finally, "that sometimes our hearts know better than our minds what's truly right. The question is whether we're brave enough to listen." That afternoon, Dr. Kim took him to a place she called a library. It was a building filled with books, physical repositories of human knowledge and stories. Kethvar had never seen anything like it. The Zephyrians stored all information in central databases, accessible only to those with proper authorization. "Anyone can come here," Dr. Kim explained. "Rich or poor, young or old, citizen or refugee. All human knowledge is available to anyone who wants to learn." They walked through sections containing history, science, philosophy, and fiction. Dr. Kim pulled books from shelves seemingly at random, showing him the scope of human thought and creativity. "This is a book about a man who hid refugees during a war, knowing he could be executed for it," she said, showing him one volume. "This one tells the story of a scientist who gave away a medical discovery that could have made her wealthy, because she believed healing should belong to all humanity." Book after book told similar stories. Humans who chose principle over profit, love over logic, sacrifice over safety. They were not isolated incidents but part of a pattern that ran through human history like a golden thread. "Why do you show me these things?" Kethvar asked. "Because I think you're struggling with a choice," Dr. Kim replied. "And I want you to know that you're not the first person to face the conflict between duty and conscience." That evening, Kethvar stood in his ship's communication chamber, staring at the controls that would connect him to the Imperial Council. His final report was due. A simple transmission that would seal humanity's fate. Instead of activating the communicator, he walked to his personal quarters and looked at the collection of gifts humans had given him over the past month. Children's drawings. A small, carved figure Dr. Kim had brought from her travels. A book of poetry that a teacher had pressed into his hands. A flower that a young girl had picked for him from her garden. Each item was worthless by Imperial standards. None served any practical purpose. Yet somehow, they had become more precious to him than anything he owned. He sat at his desk and began composing 2 documents. The first was his official report, a cold, analytical assessment that would satisfy the Council and doom humanity to servitude. The second was something else entirely, a document that contained everything he had truly learned about humans, their capacity for love without condition, their ability to create beauty in the midst of suffering, their willingness to sacrifice for principles they could not even clearly define, their insistence that every individual life had value, regardless of utility or productivity. As dawn broke over Earth, Kethvar made his choice. He encrypted the second document and transmitted it not to the Imperial Council, but to Dr. Kim's personal communication device. Then he destroyed the transmission logs and began preparing for what he knew would be his final act as a Zephyrian ambassador. The Imperial fleet would arrive in 9 days. But before they did, humanity would learn the truth about what was coming for them. And perhaps, if they were as remarkable as he had come to believe, they would find a way to preserve what made them special, even in the face of impossible odds. The Imperial Council chamber stretched vast and cold before Keth Var as he stood in the defendant's circle. Above him, 7 high commanders sat in judgment, their pale faces showing no emotion as they reviewed his case. The chamber walls displayed the symbols of 12 conquered civilizations, species that had learned to embrace imperial logic over their primitive emotions. High Commander Thexnal spoke first, her voice echoing in the sterile space. Ambassador Keth Var, you stand accused of treason against the Zephyrian Empire. You failed to provide required intelligence reports. You warned the human species of imperial intentions. You refused direct orders to facilitate their integration. Keth Var said nothing. He had returned to the imperial homeworld 8 days ago, transported directly from Earth to this chamber. Since then, he had remained silent, speaking only when directly questioned, and then only in single words. The Council demands an explanation for your actions, continued Thexnal. Your service record spans 3 centuries. You have successfully integrated 17 species. Why did you betray the Empire for a primitive human civilization? For a long moment, Keth Var simply stood in the circle, his black eyes staring at something the Council could not see. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. They choose to love. Commander Vextor leaned forward. Clarify this statement. They choose to love, Keth Var repeated, slightly louder this time. Emotional dysfunction is not grounds for refusing imperial directives. The humans would have been cured of such inefficiencies under our guidance. Keth Var's hands trembled as something hot and foreign spilled from his large black eyes. The droplets fell to the floor with tiny splashing sounds that echoed strangely in the silent chamber. The council members recoiled in shock. None of them had seen tears in over 1,000 years. The Zephyrian species had genetically modified such responses out of their biology long ago, considering them wasteful and disruptive to clear thinking. Medical scan indicates extreme emotional disturbance, announced the chamber's artificial intelligence. Recommend immediate psychological intervention. But Keth Var continued speaking through his tears, his voice growing stronger. I watched them save strangers in a storm. I saw them sacrifice their own comfort for people they had never met. I observed parents work themselves to exhaustion for children who gave them nothing but worry and expense. Standard parental behavior designed to ensure genetic survival, Commander Withpal interjected. No, Keth Var said firmly. More than genetics. Much more. I saw a teacher stay late every day to help a child who could barely read. I watched elderly humans volunteer at hospitals, comforting patients who would never recover. I observed young people spend their free time cleaning up parks and streets, making beauty for others to enjoy. More tears fell, creating a small puddle at his feet. The council members whispered among themselves, disturbed by this display of what they considered mental illness. I saw a species that had learned something we forgot long ago, Keth Var continued. They understand that logic without love leads only to empty existence. They know that efficiency without compassion produces nothing worth preserving. Commander Thexnal's voice grew sharp. The Empire has brought peace and prosperity to 12 star systems. We have eliminated war, poverty, and disease. Yes, Keth Var agreed. And in doing so, we have eliminated everything that makes existence meaningful. When did any of us last feel joy? When did we last create something beautiful just because it pleased us? When did we last help someone simply because they needed help? The silence stretched long and uncomfortable. Finally, Commander Zeknil spoke. These emotions you describe are primitive evolutionary remnants. They serve no purpose in an advanced civilization. Keth Var looked up at the 7 figures judging him. For the first time since his return, he smiled, an expression so alien on a Zephyrian face that it made the council members physically uncomfortable. "I met a human child named Emma," he said. "She was 7 years old. When she learned I was far from home, she drew me a picture of my ship surrounded by Earth's flowers so I would not feel lonely. She gained nothing from this act. It served no logical purpose. Yet it was the most beautiful gift I have ever received." He reached into his robe and withdrew the crumpled drawing, holding it up for the council to see. "This child taught me something that all our science and logic could not. She taught me that love is not a weakness to be cured. It is strength we abandoned. It is the reason civilizations exist in the first place." "Enough," Commander Thexnall declared. "This contamination has clearly progressed beyond treatment. The defendant will undergo complete memory erasure and personality reconstruction. You cannot erase what I have become," Kethvar said calmly. "You can remove my memories, reprogram my thoughts, even destroy my body. But you cannot change what I discovered on Earth. And what is that? That we are already dead. We are sophisticated corpses, going through the motions of existence without any understanding of what it means to truly live." His tears had stopped, but his eyes still gleamed with moisture. "The humans are alive in a way we have forgotten how to be. The humans are primitives who will destroy themselves within centuries," Commander Vextor snapped. "Perhaps. But they will do so while feeling joy, love, hope, and wonder. They will create art and music and stories that celebrate the beauty of existence. They will form bonds that transcend logic and sacrifice for principles they cannot even define." Kethvar's voice grew stronger. "They will live in every sense of that word." Commander Thexnall stood, her silver robes rustling in the silence. "The Council has heard enough. Ambassador Kethvar, you are hereby stripped of rank and citizenship. You will undergo immediate psychological reconstruction." "I understand," Kethvar replied. "But know this, I am not broken. For the first time in my existence, I am whole. The humans showed me what we lost when we chose logic over love. They reminded me what it means to be truly alive." As the guards moved forward to escort him to the medical facilities, Kethvar spoke one final time. "The Empire may conquer their world. You may scatter their people across a dozen star systems. You may try to cure them of their beautiful madness. But you will fail, because love cannot be destroyed by logic. Hope cannot be eliminated by efficiency. And eventually, their humanity will touch even our coldest hearts." He paused at the chamber's exit, looking back at the council. "I have seen what we could become again. I have witnessed the future we abandoned. The humans will remind the galaxy what civilization is truly meant to accomplish." The guards led him away, but his words echoed in the vast chamber long after he was gone. For the first time in a millennium, the Imperial Council sat in uncomfortable silence, each member struggling with questions they had never thought to ask. Outside the chamber's viewing portals, the sterile city of the Zephyrian homeworld stretched to the horizon. Millions of beings going through the motions of existence without joy, passion, or wonder. It was efficient. It was logical. It was perfect. It was also completely, utterly empty. And for the first time since they had achieved their perfect society, some of the council members began to wonder what they had truly accomplished and what they had lost along the way.